Hello, and welcome to Session 2 of the Seesaw Research Group. Thanks again for your feedback on the overview session, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts for this round. In this session, we'll be discussing mental models to organize and navigate your application as you build it, which includes the concepts of states and scenarios. Before we begin the demo, I want to define states and scenarios so we're thinking in the same terms. When I say state, I mean a mental stopping point in an application. And I say a mental stopping point because there still may be items moving or changing on the screen. But states are more about you, the user, defining a moment within the application so it makes sense to you. States are typically strung together by animated transitions. And when I say scenario, I'm talking about a path through an application comprised of a series of states and transitions. This path is typically defined by a task the user is trying to accomplish. Now let's go into the demo. In the first concept, we're making scenarios the primary way to organize and create your application. So there's a panel here at the bottom of the screen. When you open it, it's showing the scenarios, which are groups of states and transitions that exist for this application. So far there are two here. There's a register scenario and a create ticket scenario. There'll also be a way to go to an all scenario view that shows you all the scenarios at once for your application instead of having to navigate linearly in one line through the panel. So you can use this panel to navigate through your app by clicking on the different thumbnails. And if you're moving forward in a scenario, you can use this button here to the arrow to the right of the screen to move to that scenario and actually show the transition that's happening. These rectangular icons in between the screens represent the transitions, and you can click on them to edit your transition. You can even preview them before you move on. So say I want to add a new state to my registration scenario. I'm going to start by clicking the Add a State button. From here, I have a couple of different options. I can add a state to the register scenario based on one of the following states. So based on a state that already exists in the application. And when you create a state based on another state, what that means is you're going to share components across them. So for example, if there's a navigation bar or a background image that one state has and it's locked, that means whenever you create a state based on that existing state, that those items cannot be changed. Or if they are changed, they will propagate to all the other states. So right now we're referring to that as being linked. Linked is not the same thing as you click on one state and it goes to another state. Linked states simply means that they share components. I can also choose to add an existing state to my scenario because states can exist in more than one scenario. Or I can start from a blank state. So in this case, I want my final screen to be very similar to this registration 1 state. So I'm going to choose that one to start with and go ahead and add it to my scenario. So here I have my new state in my scenario. So the first thing I'm going to do is start editing the state. So I'm going to select this component and I'm going to delete it. I'm going to select this header. And I'm going to see here that there's a link icon that shows up when I have the header selected and then I can't delete it. So what that link icon means is that it is being shared across other states. And when I hover over it, I can see that the registration 1 and registration 2 states are sharing this component. So I can do two different things. I can either choose to edit across all the states by clicking on that button there, or I can unlink that component, which would then make it local, so it wouldn't apply to the other pages. But what I really want is to edit the label that exists in that header. So when I click there, I can see that it's not linked to any other states. So I can go ahead and edit the label. Now, before I do anything else to this state, I want to create the transition between registration 2 and this new state. So I'm going to go back to registration 2, and this button I want to be the trigger for going to the new state. So I'm going to select that button. And from here, I have an option to add an action. So when I click on this button, I am taken to my Add Actions dialog. From this dialog, I can see that there are no actions attached to the register button. So I'm going to go ahead and create an action. Immediately, I'm giving a set of triggers to choose from, and I want it to be a tap trigger. Then I'm given a set of actions that I can attach to that trigger. In this case, what I want to do is go to a different state. So I choose this, and then I get another number of states to choose from. And the system is smart enough to know that most likely the state that is next in line in the scenario is going to be the one I want to go to. So I'm going to choose I'm calling it new state. That's the state I want to go to. And from here I can do a couple of different things. I can add a transition. I can add a rule. So if I want to go to one state under some circumstances and another state under different circumstances, I can do that here. Or I can add a second action, a chain of actions. So in this case, that's what I want to do. I'm going to click on this kind of ghosted action area here, and I get another set of actions to choose from. So I'm going to choose the Save Data action. And now there's two different places I can save it. I can either save it to a repository called Ticket Tracker, which is one that already exists within this application, or I can save it to a new data repository. In this instance, I'm pretty sure I want to save it to the Ticket Tracker repository, so I'm going to look at what that contains. Now this is my UI for mapping the data from the form on the page to the Ticket Tracker repository. So what I'm seeing here are the form data items, first name, last name, username, and password, and the columns in the Ticket Tracker repository. And I can visually and physically drag items from the form to the Ticket Tracker repository. So I've now just mapped this username to the username data in the repository that I have in my app. So I'm going to go ahead and connect all of those. Now that I've mapped my data, I want to add a transition between the two screens. So here I'm going to click on adding a transition, and I have a number to choose from: sliding, fading, zooming. I'm going to choose slide transition. I can watch a preview here. I'm done. And there I have my action for the button with the slide left transition. So I then exit the action builder, and now on my page, when I have the register button selected, I can see that my action icon is pink, so that means one exists. And when I hover over it, I can see visually what that action is. So in the first part of the demonstration, I introduced scenarios as a way of organizing and navigating your application. I introduced the concept of states and that components can be shared across states. I showed a way to add an action to a trigger on a screen, and I showed a visual way of data mapping items going from a form to a data repository. So in the second part of the demonstration, I'm going to show an alternate mental model for organizing your application, in addition to a slightly different way to add actions to a trigger. So here I'm going to open up my bottom panel, and it looks different from the scenario panel I showed you in your last demonstration. This is what I'm calling an application map panel. Now, I'll start by showing you the full screen mode. This is a map of your application similar to a sitemap, where states do not show up more than once, as they would in scenarios. They are simply arranged in a hierarchical manner. So in the same way that you would on a sitemap, put the home page first, the primary navigation next, and put the other pages coming below that. In this case, again, it is something that you create. So the user creates this map the way that feels right for them. And in this larger view, perhaps that map could be interactive. You can open and close the nodes if you want to see how the other states are arranged. But the important thing, again, is that the user is the one creating this map. So instead of having all of their states listed in a flat list, like a directory list, it's more of a three-dimensional list, so they could put their states in a hierarchy that makes sense to them. This will also help when someone else opens up the application and needs to edit it or work on it. They can then see it organized in a way that gives them a good idea of what the application is made of as a whole. So this panel is very similar to the full application map that I just showed. The nodes are expandable and collapsible, and you can use this map to navigate to the different states, and you can use it also to add new states. So I'm going to click here. I would like to add a registration state that comes from the login page. So I'm going to call it register, and this looks like the right location coming from login. And here I have a couple of different options. Again, I could add a state based on an existing state, or what I'm getting here is a recommendation from the recommendation engine. So a registration form is being recommended to me, even though I do not have one in my project, and that's because I titled the name of the state register. So the system is smart enough to know that I'm most likely looking for a registration form. So I can drill down into this and learn more about it before I add it to my project, but for now I'm going to see if I'm lucky and just go ahead and add the form. So I've now added that state to my project. It looks pretty good for creating an account. That's pretty much what I'm going for. Now I do know I just want one other state, and I want that to be a confirmation state, like your account has been created. So I'm going to drag this guy down. Again, you can organize your pages here any way you want, whatever makes sense to you. And I'm going to add a new state called account created. Again, there's a couple other states that I can choose from, existing states. I did not get a recommendation in this case because they didn't have a match that looked good. But I am going to choose the registration form. I want to create this state based on that one, sharing some of the components like we saw in the last demo. So I'm going to add that state, and I'm going to start by deleting this. I want to change the label on here. And again, I'm seeing the little link icon, which is telling me that this component is being shared across states. But unlike the last demo, when I hover over this icon, I get the opportunity to click on this Show Linked States menu option, and now I'm seeing them down here in my navigation bar because we're thinking that states might be something you want to click and navigate through before you make a decision on editing that component. So by putting them down here, this is going to be the place where you're doing most of your navigation. So I'm going to go back to my application map view. And now I want to change this label. And the next thing I want to do is create the transition from the register page. So I'm going to go back to the register page, and close this for now, and I'm going to select my register button. Now, unlike the last demonstration, instead of there being an icon to get to the master action builder, I have in my side panel here the ability to add actions. I'm also seeing some information about the data that is connected to this trigger and to this form. This is an important point to make about Seesaw in general. We're hoping that 80% of your widgets you will not have to do any sort of data mapping. So widgets that contain data inputs will automatically have a repository behind them that come along with them as one thing. So the data mapping that I showed you in the last demonstration might actually be a rare case. So in this instance, the form is connected to a registered user's data repository, and I can drill down into it if I want to look at it more closely. But for now, what I want to do is add an action. So instead of going into the action builder, I am just going to go to my panel here and click on this ghosted add an action button. Here I get another number of triggers similar to what we saw in the action builder. I'm going to choose tap. I want this to be a go-to, and I'm seeing a limited set of actions, which is important in a minute. I'm going to choose go-to, and then I'm going to select a destination. I can add a transition here. I want it to be a slide transition. I can preview it if I want. It looks pretty good, and I am going to save it. So the idea is that when you're creating actions that are simple, like tapping on a trigger and going to another state, that you could quickly do that in the Actions panel. If you want to get into more complicated actions, you can go into full screen mode where you're going to see everything that's going on. You can see the data being saved, and when you go to create an action, you'll get more options than what you get in the panel. But the idea is that the majority of the users will never have to go into the Action Builder dialog. They can quickly and easily create the most simple actions just by using this panel. So that is it for today's demonstration. I want to thank you for your time and your feedback and for taking the survey. Happy holidays.